In this video, I'm going to go over converting a Create React App project to be a single SPA application. Now, the first thing to say is that if you're starting on a new project, just use Create Single SPA, which is the CLI for creating single SPA React projects. You shouldn't do this if you're starting from scratch. This is geared towards those who already have a Create React App project and are wanting to convert it over to being a single SPA application. Okay, so what are we looking at here? This is the package.json file for a brand new Create React App. Now, your Create React App probably will have some extra stuff because you've added features to it, but this is just starting from a clean slate. We've got our package.json. It uses React scripts. We see this nasty eject here. Don't worry, we're not going to use it. We're not going to eject. However, we are going to do something maybe even worse. I'll come back to that. Secondly, we've got our index.html, we've got our app.js. This is just the blank Create React App. The question to ask here is, why do we need to change anything at all? Why can't single SPA just work with Create React App? And the answer has to do with two things. The first is the HTML file. In single SPA, each micro frontend has to coexist in the same HTML page with every other micro frontend. This is different than how Create React App approaches things. It creates an HTML file per project. Secondly, we need to make some modifications to the Webpack config in order for it to work well with System.js and with single SPA. And so, unfortunately, you can't really modify the Webpack config for Create React App. It is hidden inside of React scripts, and there's really no way to modify it. There's React App Rewired, there's ejecting, there's maybe some other options, but there's no easy way to modify the Webpack config here. Okay, so what approach are we going to take? I hinted at it a little bit earlier by talking about eject. We are not going to eject. We're going to do something maybe even more invasive though. What we're going to do is we are going to delete all of our scripts. We are going to delete these 6 dependencies. You don't have to delete all of your dependencies. Just delete these ones that came with Create React App. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run Create Single SPA on top of our existing project. Now, Create Single SPA is documented here on singlespa.js.org. It is the CLI for single SPA. You can use it with npm, with Yarn. You can globally install it. Okay. So we're creating a single SPA application, not a utility module and not a root config. Creating it in React with Yarn. And I called this one CRA test. So we do need to overwrite the package.json. And for the get ignore, it doesn't matter which one you choose, whether to overwrite or not. Okay, so you'll see here that Create Single SPA has made some pretty big modifications to the package.json. It actually did preserve some of the package.json. You can see the ESLint config, browsers list, and then any dependencies that we would have left are still there, and you can see React DOM popped in there. It added a bunch of dependencies. But yeah, we've now merged the single SPA, Create Single SPA package.json with the Create React App application. If that hasn't scared you enough, the next step is to delete the public directory entirely. So like I said, we don't need an HTML file. And these images, we're going to handle them elsewhere if we need to. Okay. So we that was the most destructive part. If I've already scared you away, I understand. This is like ejecting, except even worse. But believe me, this is actually like not that bad, relatively speaking. I've gone down other paths, and this one's actually one of the easier ways of converting your CRA project to be single spa. Next thing is all these green files here were created by single spa. And so we've got this new project. This is the entry point, the new entry point for Webpack. The old entry point for Webpack is this one. We're going to delete that file too. Now the CSS file, we might need it, to make it look right. So what we're going to do is we're going to import it inside of our new entry file. Okay. And service worker, if you want to use the service worker, you can continue, you carry over the code. I am not really going to need the service worker, so I'm deleting that as well. Okay. So now let's talk about this root component. This root component, so it's imported here and used here, and then it's right here. This root component is the same thing as the app.js file. So I'm going to delete, this time I'm going to delete the create single spa file instead of the CRA file. I'm going to delete the root component and instead use the app component as our root. Okay, here we are. So here's our entry file. We got a new file. We're reusing app.js. We deleted index.js, but we kept index.css. We've overwritten our Babel ESLint, and we got some prettier stuff. This will change your ESLint config. You can see in the package JSON, in the package JSON, it wants to use the create React app ESLint. That's okay if you want to. Maybe just move this into ESLint config if you want to keep it. I'm gonna, for simplicity, just delete this one and use the one that create single spa gave us, but you can keep that, that's fine. But yeah, we got some new files. Importantly, we do have a Webpack config now. Let's go over this. So notice, good news is you don't have to learn everything about Webpack. The bad news is you are going to have to learn some things about Webpack in order to make this work. So single spa defaults gives you a Webpack config that works pretty well. This Webpack merge allows you to add your own stuff on top of that. And so we are going to need to add some stuff on top of the single spa defaults. And that's where we're going to have to learn some Webpack along the way. But for the most part, things will be mostly working just by using this Webpack config that comes from single spa. Another thing I want to point out here down here is when we did yarn create single spa, it gave us some instructions at the end, and we're actually going to follow the instructions. We're going to run this yarn start command, and then we're going to go to that URL. So, spoiler alert, it's not going to work immediately, but we will get there soon. Okay, so here we are. We've got some errors. These errors are okay. We can fix them. It won't be the worst thing. So the first one is about app.css. And so this CSS file right here is being imported, but Webpack doesn't know how to deal with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to install a Webpack loader called CSS Loader. So let's install it. And we can just like pretty much wholesale take what they suggest as the Webpack config. Didn't even have to really parse it or learn it or anything. Okay, so we've done that. Now I just killed my terminal that was running yarn start, and I'm running it again. Okay, so this time, notice last time we had two errors. We had the CSS error and then we had this SVG error. Now we've only got one, so we did solve the CSS error problem. Next one, so with SVG files, what we should use for that, any image files, we should use File Loader. So this one, again, we can take their config pretty much wholesale. We already have a module rules inside of our Webpack config, so we just need to add this new object to it. I'm going to add that here. Additionally, if you look, this one covers PNG, JPEG, and GIF. We needed to cover SVG as well. All images can be covered by this file loader. Here we go. And we need to install it. Okay. Okay, so Webpack is now bundling, and when you go through this on your own project, you might be exasperated watching this video because this was so easy for me, and for you there were so many more errors and you had to do so much more. Yeah, sorry about that if you do have to do a lot of work just to get your code compiling. What I'd suggest is, first start with these loaders. So find the files that just cannot be understood. So like CSS files or SVG files, find the ones that Webpack's complaining about, get those covered. After that, you still might have some problems and you'll have to just look up how to get the Webpack config going. But this should get you fairly far. I mean, there's the Create React App Webpack config has more than this in it. But this covers a fair amount of what you actually need from the Create React App Webpack config. And so here we are. It is compiling. Now, if we scroll back up to where we ran yarn create single spa, it told us to run yarn start, and then it told us to go to this URL. So I'm going to go to that URL. So it's going to open up a website called Single Spa Playground, and Single Spa Playground lets us see, is it going to work with Single Spa, and then even diagnose it, hopefully. So here we go. I'll open it up. Okay, so we've got an error. It's coarse. Same origin policy disallows this. What's actually happening here is probably more related to HTTPS than it is to CORS. I think the HTTPS request is failing. So I'm going to open up this in a new tab. So I did command click, control click to do this. This is the HTTPS warning. I'm going to accept it. Now you can see, now we're able to actually download the JavaScript file. So Single Spa Playground runs on HTTPS, so our local host also has to be on HTTPS, and then you've got to deal with certificates. But you need to get to this point where you can actually download the JavaScript file in its own browser tab. Once you have that, let's refresh the page. Here we are. So we have done it. This is Create React App now working as a Single Spa application. Like I said, I understand that for a more established Create React App project, likely getting this Webpack stuff is going to be more complex. That's the majority of the work. The Single Spa Slack workspace is available to try to help you sort through some of those issues. But yeah, you need to get this Webpack config to a point where it's able to compile. And so now let's do a couple last things to tidy up what we've done here. So let's try running all of these scripts and seeing which ones succeed and which ones fail. So we've already done yarn start. Let's do yarn build. So yarn build will create a dist directory, and so that worked. Yarn analyze. So yarn analyze, this also, so this gives us like how big is our bundle? So this is 12 kilobytes, and then where is it coming from? Let's do yarn lint. Okay, so it's complaining about a bunch of prettier things. So we are using prettier to format the code. So you can do yarn prettier, and that will modify the files that it can. These errors here are actually known bugs in the create single spa templates, so they might be fixed by the time that you run through them. I'll fix them really quick here. So we need to ignore dist and then ignore all SVG files. Let's try prettier again. So now prettier worked. Okay, now we need to do yarn lint again. Let's see if the lint works. It did. Now let's do yarn test. It did fail. The test is importing app.js, and app.js is importing logo.svg, and the single spa jest config to run the tests doesn't have SVGs configured. And so let's do this. We can do jest SVG. Let's see what this says. Yeah, so here they're suggesting adding this to your jest config. Yeah, they're saying change your jest config and then create a file called filemock. So, okay, I've added to my jest config. Now I need to create that file. So it's in the mocks directory, and then it's called filemock.js. Okay, now let's try that test again. Okay, so we got a new error this time. I'm gonna do yarn test watch. You can also do yarn watch tests right here, so that we can try it again. Expect link element to be in the document. Let's look at this test. Okay. So I'm going to debug. So this will print out what was rendered. Here it is. Learn React. Here it is. Boom. Yeah, so I think that this one here is related to this to be in the document. To be in the document assertion. So with create React app, it is actually inserting the React code, the React DOM elements into the fake DOM, but with create single spa, it does not insert it into the fake DOM. So we can do something like this to be truthy. That would work. Alternatively, you could switch over to actually using, like having it insert into the DOM. You could configure it to do that. Now our test is passing. Okay, so that could be another painful step for you if you've got a lot of tests that don't work. Now let's try, we already did watch tests, now coverage. So we'll just give you code coverage for all the files. Let's see, it failed. Let's see. I'm actually confused why the coverage would fail when the test would succeed. let's see here. Let's see what the okay. Yeah, so they've modified for coverage. This is called instrumentation. They modify your code so that they can tell which lines were actually covered. And so let's look at this app.js real quick. Return. Yeah, so this, to me, this honestly looks like a bug in like Jest or something. I'm not sure why this wouldn't work. Let's call app as a function to see what is the return value. Undefined. Yeah, so when it's running in normal mode, it's working just fine. But when it's running in coverage mode, the instrumentation is causing it to not return the correct things. So to be honest, I'm not 100% sure on this one. I would probably go start looking in the Jest GitHub issues to see if I can figure this one out. However, we're going to ignore it for now for the sake of this video being a reasonable length and not going down too many rabbit holes. I'm going to wrap up now by saying, okay, so this is the approach that I would recommend. Using the Webpack config single spa React will get you in a good spot, a pretty good spot, and then adding in your own Webpack config as needed will get you the rest of the way there. However, there are alternatives. So one alternative is React App Rewired. So this is, if you did get scared when you saw me delete the public directory and delete the React scripts from package.json and stuff, if you did get scared from that, you can do React App Rewired. There's some documentation on singlespajs.org that explains some stuff. It doesn't have a fully working React App Rewired thing that you can just plug in, but it does talk about some things that you'll need to do. And then alternatively, you can do eject. You can do a React App eject. I find that create React Apps internals are like so unreasonably complicated that it sort of sucks, which is why I preferred using create single spa. Here we can see we do have access to the Webpack config, but this isn't that nasty. It's only 30 lines of code. If you eject your Webpack config, you'll have a few hundred lines of code. Similarly, your Jest config will be gigantic, your Babel config, your lib config that one might be simple. But there's, you'll end up with a whole bunch of files inside of a scripts directory, and then you'll have to figure out what to do with it. I find this approach to be a bit easier. However, keep in mind that those other approaches do exist. So I'm hopeful that this video helps some people get it going. I do acknowledge that for an existing project, it's likely going to take a bit more work than just a clean slate React app project. However, I'd encourage you to join the Single Spa Slack workspace, which has over 1,000 people in it, and a lot of people, including myself, who have done this kind of thing before. We'd be happy to help walk you through this.